Good evening and welcome to Martino's Auditorium at the Granoff Center for the Creative Arts at Brown University, and to the first of many events as part of the Re-Examining Conservation Exhibition and Symposium presented by the Brown Arts Institute and Creature Conserve. I am Thangam Ravindranathan, Professor of French and Francophone Studies here at Brown. Please join me in remembering that Brown University is located in Providence, Rhode Island, on lands which are within the ancestral homelands of the Narragansett Indian tribe. We acknowledge that the Narragansett Indian tribe was dispossessed from their lands by the forces of settler colonialism, and we acknowledge our ongoing responsibility to understand and respond to the legacy of those actions. We acknowledge that the Narragansett and other indigenous peoples have called Providence home for centuries and continue to do so today. We acknowledge with humility and respect the Narragansett Indian tribe whose ancestors stewarded these lands with great care, and we commit to working together to honor our past and to build our future with truth. I hope that everyone has had a chance to explore the Re-Examining Conservation Questions at the Intersection of the Arts and Sciences art exhibition, installed here in our Cohen and Atrium galleries. The exhibition is curated by Heather McMordie, Creature Conserve Arts Curator, with support from Haley Johnson and Lindsay Montanari, Creature Conserve Curatorial Scholars. It is free and open to the public through June 10th, and an audio tour is available via the exhibition website, so please explore. The exhibition is also accompanied by a reading room via the exhibition website. The exhibition is also, I already said that, accompanied by a reading room compiled by Susan Tassent, Creature Conserve Writer in Residence, and Lisa Kahn-Schnell, Creature Conserve Mentor. Our deepest thanks to Dr. Lucy Spellman for founding Creature Conserve, and to Lucy and her team for the hard work they do to bring arts and science together for the benefit of imperiled animals. Thank you also to the Tomaquag Museum's Indigenous Empowerment Network, who has been working in conjunction with Creature Conserve on this exhibition in efforts to further amplify the voices of the Indigenous community in Rhode Island. At Brown University, we have an informal group of faculty working together to address animal studies from a very multidisciplinary approach. As a member of this group, I am glad to welcome you to the first evening of the Re-Examining Conservation Symposium, featuring faculty, students, and guest artists in a stellar lineup. Schedule details can be found in the digital program for the symposium, which can be accessed via the symposium website, that is go.brown.edu/reexaminingconservation, or via the QR code posted at the entrance of the auditorium, right there. So we're delighted to be partnering with the Brown University Bookstore, who is carrying titles authored by many of our symposium participants, and is offering a 20% discount on purchases of those titles made between now and Saturday, April 23rd. The discount will be automatically applied to purchases made in person at the bookstore. Huge thanks to Thalia Field, the faculty director of the Brown Arts Institute, and really the creative mind and vision behind this whole symposium. And we're really very sorry that circumstances have not allowed her and are not allowing her to be actually with us today and tomorrow. And a special shout out to the staff of the BAI, and many special thanks to Jessica Vasilevsky, producing director extraordinaire, and all the tech staff, Greg, Peter, and Andy in the control booth, and Paul at the camera. Thank you for that really vital and talented work, without which such events would not be possible. So now for tonight's performances. First up, Snail Cinema, a performance based on Ada Smailbegović's book, Poetics of Liveliness, Molecules, Fibers, Tissues, Clouds. This book takes up questions of how poetry relates to science, examining how both of those practices seek to understand materiality and form as they undergo change and transformation. One of the central questions that both the book and the performance asks is, Can poetry act as an aesthetic amplification device, akin to a microscope, through which we can sense minute or nearly imperceptible phenomena, such as the folding of molecules into their three-dimensional shapes, the transformations that make up the life cycle of a silkworm, or the vaporous movements that constitute the ever-shifting edges of clouds? Snail Cinema takes these questions even further to consider how phenomena that may be challenging to perceive at the human scale, such as the non-monumental temporality of a snail's movement, but also the complex temporal rhythms of issues central to conservation, such as climate change, can be rendered perceptible through aesthetic practice. The adaptation of the book into performance involved a collaboration with artist Matthew Thurber, whose own interest in the multi-layered temporalities of animation, cinema, and narrative centered around animal characters intersected with these questions. Snail Cinema includes performances by Ada and Matthew, and also Brown students Nicole Kim, Ricardo Gomez, Murphy Chang, Pepper Greenley, and Jaden Schoenfeld, who have all explored many of the central concerns of the performance in Ada's classes, such as Earth Poetics, Zoopoetics, and Tiny Politics over these past few years. The Snail Cinema performance will be immediately followed by an on-stage conversation between Ada and Matthew. Following this conversation, we'll take a brief pause to reset the stage, and then we'll move into a second performance, this time of Thalia Field's This Crime Has a Name. So please first join me in welcoming Ada, Matthew, and the student readers to the stage.
We begin our journey on a sunny day before a flowering meadow in which insects buzz and butterflies flutter. The dragonflies, with their still lattice of vibrating wings, glide across, glinting metallic in the sun. The bees, with their fuzzy yellow and black striped bodies, move from one flower to another, buzz, 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 through the air and into the blue sky, landing on each petal and passing through a shower of sweet yellow dust. Buzz, 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 buzz. The flower shapes turning in the bee's eye into a pattern of stars and circles. The stars are open blossoms. They say, yes, here is sweet juice. The circles are unopened buds, not quite flowers. They say, not yet, come back later. Only the blooms, not the buds, have meaning for the bees.
Now I call upon you to open your mind's eye and make a bubble around each of the animals living in the meadow. In this tiny performance, you squirt some dish soap into a bottle of water and shake it up. Dip a stick with a circle on one end into the soapy water and exhale into it until the iridescence stretches into pink and peacock green, until you borrow the colors that grace any pigeon's neck. Now wrap this bubble around any mosquito, around any snail, around any earthworm, around any tick, around any bee. This perceptible island of the senses of touch, smell, hearing, sight enfolds the animal like fabric, like 4 envelopes of an increasingly sheer garment, like lace, a pink chiffon of sensation.
Take a tick, for example. Any country dweller who traverses woods and bush with his dog has certainly become acquainted with this little animal who lies in wait on the branches for his prey, be it dog or human. Any mammal will do. All the tick wants to do is dive onto the victim and to suck himself full of blood. Yum, yum, yum. The tick cares only about three things, three notes of sensation that flood its entire perceptual universe: sunlight, the smell of sweat, and the warmth of blood. First, it senses the rays of the sun descending on its eyeless body, and it moves up, 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 towards the sun, up, 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 a slim stalk of grass all the way to the top. And there it waits, luxuriating in the warmth of the sun. A tick can wait for 18 years for its victim to arrive. Now that's a long time according to any human clock. The tick is very still and quiet, and yet the whole time it is smelling its tiny universe, waiting for a whiff of butyric acid, which is secreted in the sweat of mammals. Once detected, it dives down into the unknown landing of the soft pad of fur and begins to burrow in. Finding a spot free of hair, it bores into the skin, sticking its whole head into the warm blood of the mammal. Now the tick pumps a stream of warm blood slowly into itself. The tick's hearty blood meal is also its last meal, for it now has nothing more to do than fall to the ground, lay its eggs, and die. Mosquito astronomy, mosquito astronomy, mosquito astronomy, mosquito astronomy, mosquito astronomy, mosquito astronomy.
They see small mosquito suns that set at half a meter away.
Mosquito
The moon and the stars are absent from the sky of the mosquito. The moon and the stars are absent from the sky of the mosquito.
Astronomy, mosquito astronomy,
A mosquito buzzing and fluttering under the dome of a mosquito sky. Seeing through its tiny compound eyes many tiny proximate suns. The mosquito universe, the universe of a mosquito. No moon and no stars, just many warm orange globes, as close as an orange on the table, as close as an orange in your hand, multiplying many, many, many suns. Mosquito astronomy, mosquito astronomy, mosquito astronomy, astronomy.
By this the earth itself, which lies so near us, under our feet, shows quite a new thing to us, and in every little particle of its matter we now behold almost as great a variety of creatures as we were able to reckon up in the whole universe itself. Take this speck of dirt, for instance, and place it under the microscope, and it shall open up into a world full of crevices and craters as deep as the surface of the moon when viewed through the lens of the telescope. Or take this needle, so slick and sharp to a human's eye, but under my trusty lens it too is pocked, full of craters and chasms. Through the lens of the microscope a whole geography begins to appear in it, of hills and dales and pores, big enough to afford 100 armed mites room enough to be crowded together, without endangering the breaking of one another's necks by being thrust off on either side.
Each portion of matter may be conceived as a garden full of plants, and as a pond full of fish, But each branch of a plant, each limb of an animal, each drop of its humors is also such a garden or such a pond. And although the earth and the air interspersed between the plants in the garden, or the water interspersed between the fish in the pond, are not themselves plants or fish, yet they still contain them, though more often in a form imperceptible to us.
When I accidentally broke a flintstone into pieces, I found within it a certain cavity all crusted over with a very pretty candied substance, some of the parts of which, upon changing the position of the stone in relation to light, exhibited a number of small but very vivid reflections. And with my microscope, I could perceive the whole surface of the cavity to be all covered with a multitude of little crystals.
Expose a piece of black cloth to the falling snow and observe a variety of curious figures that gather on it. I have observed above 100 sizes and shapes of these starry flakes, some like feathers, some of other shapes, herringbones or fern blades.
I remember that in summertime I once left by chance a cut lemon in a close room, and 2 months afterwards I found a putrefaction growing on the cut part, tufts of hair an inch high at least, and on the top of each hair a kind of head like the head of a small snail, plainly beginning to imitate a plant.
Snails are fond of humid earth. They lug some, they eat some, they excrete some, they traverse it traverses them. Oh, what a joy! What great good fortune to be a snail! A silvery wake trails after them.
Or the flea. The strength and beauty of this creature, had it no other relation to humans, would deserve a description. It is all over curiously adorned with a curiously polished suit of armor, neatly jointed and covered with multitudes of sharp pins, shaped almost like porcupines' quills. And look at those legs! Their joints can be folded within one another and then suddenly sprung out to their whole length, taking our little fellow to soaring heights, akin to a human being leaping across a vast chasm.
When you hear the sound of the sea, you cannot isolate the sound of one individual wave. One cannot separate a sound of one discrete wave from the overall murmur of the sea. One individual wave cannot be heard within the overall sound of the sea. Each perception is composed of 1,000 tiny perceptions which never reach the threshold of consciousness.
When I glance at this fine linen cloth made through human artifice, why, the threads are scarce discernible with the naked eye. And yet, through a lens of a microscope, you may perceive what a goodly piece of coarse matting it really is. No longer smooth, its surface full of uneven bristles and claws shows the imperfections of human senses and the crudeness of human hands. And yet, the silk thread spun by a mere creature, a silkworm, even under the finest of my lens, appears exceedingly fine, small, round, hard, transparent, and stiff, so that each filament preserves its proper figure and reflection, showing a way finer craftsmanship than anything created by the human hand.
Something delicious hits my mouth. Instinctively, I open. Mulberry leaf nectar floods it. Mulberry, 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 mulberry. I move slowly. Start from the inside. The fine hairs are a shiver. The cut edges, the tender portions, soft, succulent between the veins. Chew sideways, in thousands of arcs. In dizzying detail. Okay, embarrassed to say, in my great excitement, I fell asleep. I write it side to side. Infinity, loops, figure eight, spins. Warp, whack, 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 warp, whack.
A rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. A rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. A rose is a rose is a rose is a rose.
There is no such thing as repetition. It is very like a frog hopping. He cannot ever hop exactly the same distance or the same way of hopping at every hop. A bird singing is perhaps the nearest thing to repetition, but if you listen, they too vary their insistence. I first became conscious of this when I realized that stars are worlds and that everything is moving. I realized it when, at the age of 17, I came to live with a whole group of very lively little aunts. And, as there were 10 or 11 of them, they had to say and hear what was said often, and any one of them who had not heard what had been said had to come in and hear what had been said. When all these 11 little aunts were listening as they were talking, gradually some one of them was no longer listening. When this happened, it might be that the time had come that one of them was beginning repeating. This was before I went to medical school.
At medicine, Miss Stein worked only in a half-hearted way, and consequently her grades were always poor. A failing grade in obstetrics, and rhinology, dermatology, ophthalmology, and otology.
The last 2 years at medical school, I was bored, frankly, openly bored.
Of course, Miss Stein. All you have to do is take a summer course here, and in the fall, naturally, you'll take your degree. We just asked you to go in the search of the red nucleus, an elusive part of the brain yet unmapped. Here, take this brain and look for it under the microscope.
No problem. The nucleus is more or less conical in shape. The commissura posterior cerebri appears solid in the middle, while ventrally it expands in the form of a hollow pyramid. Oh no, I'm so sorry. I see here a lump, or little lumps stuck together. Thicker, thinner, harder, softer, all of the same consistency. Some with a lump vegetable-ish, or wooden, or metallic in them. Oh, wow. Oh, goodness. As I was saying, a change in color is likely, and a difference, a very little difference, is prepared. Sugar is not a vegetable. Light blue and the same red with purple makes a change. It shows that there is no mistake. Any pink shows that.
I can't make heads or tails of this. Either I'm crazy or Miss Stein is. The spinal cord is all bent under the cerebrum. Why, this model is pure fantasy.
Off to Paris I go.
It's simple, really. Separate 6 eggs. Beat the whites until stiff, but not dry, adding a pinch of tragacanth, a powder that can be found at any good chemist and which helps in the cooking of the whites of eggs and keeps them stiff. Add gradually, while beating, 5 tablespoons sugar.
Custard.
Place the beaten whites of eggs in a mold, gently tapping so that there are no air pockets. Put the mold uncovered in a recipient of hot water over low flame. The water should simmer, but not boil. When a coarse darning needle, kept in the kitchen for such use, stuck in the center, comes out dry, remove from flame and water.
It is better than seeding.
Soft matter. The feeling is dependent on the dusty approach of a surface towards disintegration, a powdery departure from a plane. As a liminal instance of softness, imagine perhaps stroking either a 1,000-year-old feather or a powder puff's residual blush.
Everything is filthy here. All of these objects constantly crumbling away into dust. Gertrude, perhaps you could clean up after yourself every once in a while.
Dirt is clean when there is a volume. There is breath, and there will be a sinecure, and charming, very charming, is that clean and cleansing. It was chosen yesterday that showed spitting, and perhaps washing and polishing. Certainly, glittering is handsome and convincing.
I always say that you cannot tell what a picture really is or what an object really is until you dust it every day. And you cannot tell what a book is until you type it or proofread it. It then does something to you that only reading never can do.
Alice, I've told you, I desperately need a haircut. I found that any kind of book, if you read with glasses and somebody is cutting your hair and so you cannot keep the glasses on and you use your glasses as a magnifying glass and so read word by word, reading word by word makes the writing that is not anything be something. Stamp. If lilies are white.
Basket!
If they
Basket! No! No! Let go! Basket! Basket! Basket!
I am I because my little dog knows me. It has been said by very many, said by Jules Verne, he weeps. That shows he is a man. But a dog can have tears in his eyes. Yes, he can have tears in his eyes when he has been disillusioned. A dog, when he begged, always got what he asked for. One day, he begged a little dog to give him what he wanted. The little dog did not give him what he wanted. The dog had tears in his eyes. And so, to cry does not make the human mind. Oh no, to cry does not make the human mind. It makes a piece of nature, but it does not make the human mind.
This is Basket. Not too long ago, he was a little puppy in a little neighborhood dog show, and he had blue eyes and a pink nose and white hair, and he jumped up onto Gertrude Stein's arms. Basket, although now he is a large, unwieldy poodle, still will get up into Gertrude Stein's lap and stay there. She says that listening to the rhythm of his water drinking made her recognize the difference between sentences and paragraphs, that paragraphs are emotional and that sentences are not.
Basket, a story. I am I because my little dog knows me. Is he when he does not know me? This sometimes happens, that is, his not knowing me. When it does not happen, he sometimes tries to make it happen. So is he when he does not know me? And when he does not know me, am I? But certainly this is not so, although it really very truly is so.
Gertrude, do you see that pigeon?
The 3 pigeons are there again.
There is no reason for it.
But if looking at it, you are to paint it, the pigeon is there again, and turning his back on the other 2 pigeons who are below it.
You only can see from the side where you are seeing everything. You only can see the 2 heads of the other 2 pigeons. And now there are 3.
That makes 4 in all.
That there of pigeons has nothing to do with it, but that there was 1, and then that there were 3, and then that there are 4, and that then it may not cease to matter what number follows another, but the human mind has to have it matter, that any number is a number.
This is a pigeon detective story.
How strange. I have never heard of pigeon detective stories. But never mind, I am here to watch clouds and not pigeons. Imagine an expanse of blue sky on which a single fluffy cumulus cloud is floating by. One can clearly point it out, and yet it is made up of a configuration of continuously coalescing and dissipating vapor. And then one cloud becomes 2 or 3 cumulus, to cumulostratus, to cirrus, to nimbus. Over the course of a few minutes, the air currents in the atmosphere bring new configurations of vapor as clouds move in and out of different shapes.
Comoid tufts, like bushes of hair, or sometimes like erected feathers.
Intersections of them which look like nets thrown over the firmament.
Forms of arrows, stars with long fibrous shapes ornament the sky.
Clouds change to cirrocumulus or cirrostratus. Modifications seem to form and subside spontaneously in different planes and with varied and dissimilar appearances of flocks at rest, fleeces of wool or myriad of small specks.
Long tapering columns like the tail of a great manus, or of mackerel back skies, or of striae like grains of wood.
At its middle, the mass of the cloud is wide and vibrant, so that it appears to form a bright solid but not crisp, white like the white of an egg, and bloated looking.
The woolpack begins unraveling at the edges, the wind rending it into fine wisps that involute in the way that smoke strands bend, thicken for an instant, and then move outward until they're morseled to nothing and consumed.
Moving and unmoving, blocks of sky become visible. At once, the clouds seem to cleave asunder.
The sky is flat, unmarked by distances. A white, thin cloud, chalky and milk-colored, with a remarkable oyster shell molding.
Darker clouds appear, overhung by straggling clouds that sail over them, passing quickly, driven by the lower winds.
The sky is spread over with one continuous cloud, streaked by silver lines of water running between the ridges of the vapor.
Look at those big clouds. I hope it will rain soon. Snails are fond of human earth. I lug some around, I eat some, excrete some, I traverse it, it traverses me.
Snail time, snail time, snail time, snail time, snail cinema. How long is one moment for a snail?
An interval of time in which nothing changes.
Oh, what a joy, what great good fortune to be a snail. A silvery wake trails after me. I love to eat salad, making crescents and holes in the succulent leaves, growing in the gardens of unsuspecting humans while they sleep in the wet, moonlit nights. Hidden in my shell during the day, I am protected, so attached to the soil, so intimate and slow. I can turn inward upon myself to protect my sensitive eyeballs. I can reattach myself to the ground wherever chance has landed me. So what a joy, what great good fortune to be a snail.
A snail lives 3 or 4 moments in a single second.
Movement appears much quicker in a snail world than in a human universe.
Even the snail's movements do not seem slower to it than human movements seem to a human. Snail time, snail time, snail time, snail time, snail cinema.
Oh, what a joy, what great good fortune to be a snail. A silvery wake trails after me. In it, I farm algae, returning later through my slime for a snack. My slime is a signal, a sign, a language. It tells my snail friends to glide after me. But I can also hide my traces, even disguise my gender to avoid unwanted mates. Snail trails have little arrows pointing in the direction of where I have gone. Oh, what a joy, what great good fortune to be a snail. A silvery wake trails after me.
Nothing is so handsome as this forward motion.
So like a lengthy ship with a silvery wake.
Snail time, snail time, snail time, snail time, snail cinema. This snail's pace, so slow, so sure, so discreet, such costly striving for the perfect glide with which they honor the earth. So Matthew and I are going to linger for a little bit and maybe just say a few words about the process of working on the performance. And if anyone has any questions, we're really open to that, just like a minute or two. So the project was based on my book, Poetics of Liveliness, as Thangam mentioned, which is a book about poetry and science. And it's kind of structured around like different materialities of molecules, fibers, tissues, and clouds. And so the performance sort of took you through various materialities, maybe not all of them, but some of them. And it was interesting because this is very much an academic book to think about how it could be adapted to a kind of performance mode. So maybe that's all I really want to say. I guess maybe the other thing to say is that the book is really concerned with like tiny perceptions or the ways in which maybe poetry, but also art can help us kind of translate a really different scale of perception and maybe make us more aware of it, and how these different scales of perception relate to non-human organisms and also to processes like climate change, for instance. So trying to perceive change at a different scale than maybe what the human sensorium allows. So maybe that's all I really want to say. I don't know, if there are any questions, we're open to that, but you have anything?
No, not really. I made the props.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to introduce our next and final performance for the evening. This performance is titled "This Crime Has a Name." It is from Thalia Field's 2010 book, Bird Lover's Backyard. Bird Lover's Backyard is one of Thalia Field's 3 recent books explicitly examining animal-human entanglements, also including Experimental Animals, a reality fiction, and Personhood. This is a book that just came out this year. Tonight's performers are Timothy Bewes, Colin Channer, Andrew Colarusso, David Frank, and Karan Mahajan, all amazing and brilliant faculty at Brown. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Make sure my phone is up, dear Jesus. Go, Andrew. Make sure my phone is up. Can you hold my phone for me, please? Thank you.
This crime has a name.
If I were told that an octopus can talk in, say, English or Russian, I would consider it simply as a fact of its personal biography. What it's talking about is the only thing that matters to me. Marcus Tarofsky.
I don't want to write this at all, not in English, not in any language, in any way. It's already been written. Later there will be discussion and others will call this a monologue or soliloquy. What's the difference? They won't know, and that's the difference. I must fill some pages now before it's too late. The pressure of planned obsolescence, of not being active in my semiosphere, the pressure of abstraction, a number written on my ankle band, 1011-41278. Whose Umwelt is it anyway? This is barely the consolation of a minute.
Please consider Tennyson. So careful of the type, she seems, so careless of the single life.
Nobody can understand what I'm saying. I mean, even though I'm writing properly in English, and the title of my paper, Between Air and Space, has been on my mind for many years, straight talk between organisms might add value for the speaker or for the receiver, but not many birds write papers. Am I a special case? A memory bird that died and kept right on living, exploding from one to many in mid-flight?
I recall Wittgenstein saying that even if a lion could speak, we wouldn't understand him. I don't understand this, but it feels right.
Talking about species is harder than talking about yourself. Some people propose that species are natural kinds with essential qualities. Others say species are simply DNA and decoded ancestry. Some think species are just flux, or individuals, or a matter of context, or mere convenience. Species have been called market investors, maximizing profit in speculations of self-production. You say species, I say illusion, past, present, accident, karma, nonsense, or I simply say nothing.
Lying about names is the first sign of violence. There was in ancient China the school of names, or the name disputers, who argued the exact meaning of words. If species have a kind, then that kind has a specific language, a way of speaking with the world. But even Linnaeus couldn't find a trait belonging solely to one species. He invented the police or polity of nature, the rule that excess would always be controlled and nothing would be left unscavenged. Darwin replaced fixed species with evolving ones, an endless variety of response to daily life on a single planet. Finding a place in the economy of nature is the stuff of life. Vacancy rates, however, happen.
I don't know. I don't begin to know how to name what's going on. Do you? I mean, I sort of get it. I'm not stupid. I get the big picture, but do I really understand? There's something about the way memory works which prevents this. Am I a unit of life? A unit of evolution, or am I simply the latest in a long series of mistakes? They called me aluminum green, my friend Orange Band. They fooled us with taped bird songs and nets. Since there were no females to talk about it with, we were duped. We sang. Males may be a biological kind, but we are not a species. Can we invent females? We were exhausted looking. I tell myself I'm not a dusky seaside sparrow any longer, since I don't form a functional part of the future of that group. In other words, is a species just something that can still make something of itself? Some dusky sparrow at another time or in some other place isn't part of my species because I cannot touch her. Let me put it as a philosopher might. If all gold atoms were to suddenly disappear, the class of gold die away, the species is extinct. And even if creatures identical to me evolve, they will be counted as new. The same species cannot re-evolve any more than the same person can be born twice.
Here in the lab, they control impressions. Out in the real world, I made a lot of guesses. Do I really remember what happened that day when the water rose? Some call it character displacement. Autobiographical memory serves many masters. Some say nostalgia is a pollution, and having memories is no different than having any other idea. Others say monologues are impossible, that everything is already a dialogue with yourself. They are clearly not the last of their kind. If I were designing the world, forgetting would be harder than remembering, and freedom would simply mean keeping your home.
A private language is a compelling possibility since there is no one to check on it. It might just be silliness, but a language spoken by 6 is also silliness. I am writing because I am a dead bird with 5 live brothers, or is it the other way? Anyhow, we are all dead. Could you translate for me? At the right pitch to be heard above traffic, or just wait until dark? Hello, reader. There is a social function to a call. Listeners are assumed. In basic math, only when the denominator is 0 does 6 equal none. A marsh-loving bird in an age of space.
What's the consolation of a minute? Death comes without warning. This body will be a corpse. But often there is warning. Warning and more warning. The corpse is a body in everything but name.
Kennedy Space Center, renamed for a president, assassinated. A president who put us on the path to the moon. The bullet that killed him took less than a minute, 2,000 feet per second. There was no warning. The Space Center took years to plan and design and permit and build. Originally called the Launch Operations Center, the home base for every rocket flight, they had to flood the St. Johns River and Merritt Island.
Later, when all but 6 of us dusky sparrows who lived on Merritt Island were dead, they hastily pulled together a captive breeding program at Disney World, but oops, there were no females, and only 5 males could actually be caught. To tell us apart, they called us red, orange, white, blue, yellow. The 6th male, green, was never found, and maybe I'm still here. Many would take this as a warning. The decision not to crossbreed is based on economics and selective solicitous opinions, not on biological or ethical grounds. All that is left to do now is prepare an obituary for the population. Herbert Cale. Someone named us Amodromus maritimus nigrescens, a non-migratory songbird once common in southern Florida.
So you are lost, and there are a few others. You each say you are lost, which is true, and which is hard on relationships. I'm lost, no, I'm lost, etc.
Then there was the mimicry of dying. We drooled and soiled ourselves and flapped spastically, but the marshes still disappeared under new highways to the Space Center. Cordgrass only grows in specific moisture condition, so as one neighborhood was flooded and the other drained, there was nowhere to nest. Later they tried restoring natural water. We flapped and acted totally diseased. Hysterical, deranged, unfit for fast changes, we scared them. Native vegetation gradually returned, but it was too late. Pollution and pesticides deformed the eggs, and left just 6 of us. We remember the last female from around 1975.
Oops.
Please consider William James and his specious present, what we perceive as the natural unit of time. Maybe this is one of those letter from the grave cases which have recently been admitted in jurisprudence and which can be present in the same sense a ghost can.
You know, I love biographies, and Charles Otis Whitman was one of the first scientists to believe in observing the whole life story of a bird. He kept pigeons in Chicago. Instead of by how we look, he had the bright idea that species could be better defined by how we behave. So he and his student, Wallace Craig, took notes comparing the minute attitudes of ring doves, rock doves, and passenger pigeons, of which Whitman possessed the very last female. One wonders how extinction looks compared to regular old dying. With no successful breeding passenger pairs left, Whitman sent Martha to sit caged in a drawn-out public farewell at the Cincinnati Zoo.
It's not so bad. Things end. Old Whitman froze himself, trying to keep his rookeries warm. But all that assiduous note-taking revealed that J.J. Audubon's depiction of passenger pigeons in The Birds of America got the features right, but the poses wrong. The male passenger pigeons never strutted or bowed like feral pigeons or ringdoves. They hugged up close to females who hugged close back. They didn't coo but cawed a harsher sound. It was these little things that explained why crossbreeding never worked. They literally didn't know how to love each other.
Even if we were to escape and fly back to the Martianite, I don't think we'd find it. Not because it's gone, but because memory of home can actually make it unrecognizable. I mean, what do we see at the Kennedy Space Station? Launch pads with massive rocket apparatus visible across the flat coast. Bouncy astronauts.
Wallace Craig died deaf and poor, still writing his treatise on the space system of the perceiving self. His paper was never completed, and the manuscript is lost.
It's common to say causes precede effects, and since perception is always caused, this explains why we can't perceive events which haven't happened. But our death is completely caused, and the death of my species too. Still, I must wait to talk about it. To be effective, I must stay in touch with what is going on in my own medium-sized spatio-temporal interval. If we all didn't commit to that and we set about acting on outdated or far-fetched beliefs, we might go extinct even faster, or just act like jerks. They say building on past experience is more practical than imagining the future. So what then is a warning? Why can't we experience our death, even though it is happening at the same time as our life? Something prevents us. We might be able to know it, but not without giving up the world.
All of a sudden, as if to make things interesting, biologists found another population of dusky seaside sparrows in a nearby marsh, and US Fish and Wildlife was persuaded to purchase the land. But those sparrows died too, and the tract resold for development.
If you think about it, there isn't much conflict in what's already happened. It's not good story material. Even the ancient school of names is a taxonomical fiction. A dusky sparrow is not a sparrow, they might have said. Today, go to Florida, but arrive yesterday. They were called the disputers, name throwers, distinction wrestlers, logic destroyers. Mostly they debated about the relation of words to things, about the modifiers hard or white, arguing both sides of anything. They loved lawsuits. They had no need for facts. They argued about same and different. Heaven is as low as earth. Mountains are level with marshes. Words don't have captive breeding programs or DNA. Words don't need a certain kind of cord grass. Quarreling can go on forever.
All I know is there's a book on ornithology which has pictures of birds and also plays their calls. The reader is supposed to punch in the number for each bird to hear it, but someone forgot to put numbers in the keypad, so it only has arrows, up and down. The birds only sing in order, alphabetically.
Oops.
John F. Kennedy. It will not just be one man on the moon, but an entire nation, for all of us must work to put him there.
The whole space program started with the Bumper 8, sent up 10 miles from an outhouse and a ladder. Then came intermediate-range ballistic missiles and Vanguard high-altitude research rockets. More empty scrubland got cleared and filled for the inauguration of the newly named NASA program, and Saturn three-stage rockets carried Apollo astronauts into orbit. But moon-going vehicles need more assembly room, so they added Merritt Island and 55,000 acres of submerged Mosquito Lagoon. The whole island was attached to Launch Complex 39, but the mosquitoes drove the astronauts crazy.
When a bodhisattva, a reincarnation of Padmasambhava or Buddha, passes into parinirvana, the outer body sits in samadhi for many days, months, even eternally. never decomposing until cremated. He never comes back for happy birthday.
In hindsight, they call this indicator species. I can't find food without my mud pools, mud flats. I don't like pesticide sauce on my mosquitoes. Actually, there were 6 of me, males of the species, blithely going about our daily business. Just like the astronauts, we'd always wanted to fly. We set the table, we talked about manners and weather, we tried to have esprit de corps. At the very end of the line, without a female, there is no last in line. It's all a line or a single spot, and it's all endless. This is a nameless math problem with no solution. Woody plants invade, predators increase when a marsh becomes unsubmerged. Cape Canaveral didn't want people to witness rockets crashing or burning metal and fuel raining on the ground, so they control access. What parts of the story carry the themes and symbolisms? What parts are merely background?
There are no extant writings of the name disputer, Wei Shi, although he appears in other people's texts. It is told how he relied on analogy. If you don't let him use analogies, he won't be able to speak. The king once asked Wei Shi why he wouldn't just talk directly. If you want the definition of a bird, Wei Shi replied, and all you get is a bird, you haven't learned much. But if you say a bird is like a person except with wings, then you can expand what is known by pointing out the unknown, using the same to extend into difference. But even though he was a successful politician, Wei Shi's lackadaisical relativism offended more ethics-minded Confucians.
So what rhetorical stance should we adopt? Does art merely say things that aren't facts but assert them just as strongly? Assert things but refuse to prove them? Argue but not corroborate? Fictional characters know things which are too challenging for the writer to understand, though the writer tries hard to keep up. Characters outsmart writers because characters don't eat. Hui Shi's theses are described in the text under heaven, and seem to conclude that distinctions exist merely as competing realities against the background of a world that doesn't prioritize any of them. Linked rings can be disconnected, he said.
Does this story have to be set in front of a launch pad or at Disney World? Would it work at some unnamed turn in a river? Hard and white can be applied, and yet they are inseparable from, say, a hard white river stone or a lunar module. We likewise recall abundant and disappearing cordgrass, 10 to 15 feet above sea level. Lower areas, too wet and dense, higher areas, too dry. Where was our pioneering spirit, some might ask? Why didn't we seem to have the right stuff?
If you take away my home, it turns out I don't have a place to live. If I were a bodhisattva, I would have practiced from death from the very beginning, and in just the flash of one life, could rest my feathered body in samadhi, speak my last om, ah, hum, or whatever it is a sparrow says, and never return to samsara. Universally care for the myriad things, Hui Shi concluded, heaven and earth are one body.
So we've been captive in this breeding program at Disney World since 1979. There's no cordgrass here at all. The food comes in crickets and mealworms, and every afternoon a recording of a sparrow is supposed to stimulate our songs. A few years ago, frustrated by a breeding program without females, the staff brought in a related subspecies. We were pretty happy about that. Backcrossing makes hybrids that are close to the original. Which traits do you think we maintained? The need for certain marsh moisture, dappled sun filled with mosquitoes, a preference for Mickey Mouse. We got it on. We got it on. Crossbred children breed with crossbred children until a chick with a very high percentage of dusky seaside sparrow genes, 97%, could live to finish whatever it was I was talking about in the first place.
If only living were as easy as word wrestling. The name disputers loved rearranging same and different to produce sophisms. Meanwhile, the double back-crossing breeding program couldn't get the go-ahead. Politicians argued that money for one endangered species couldn't be spent creating another one. I am red, but I will die. I am blue, but I will die before being moved. I am green, never found, presumed dead. I am white, fertile, the last hope. I die leaving only orange, almost 12 years old, alone. I am orange. I do not sing. I don't want to talk to people. I want to write unfinished papers. I am the Neil Armstrong of birds. Well, he was the first and I'm the last, but it's the same. People with checklists do not count me. I'm not a life bird anymore. Yellow, who died in 1985, was mailed to the Smithsonian in a bottle.
Who cares that more people watched 2 astronauts take steps on the moon than ever watched anything before? There they were, 2 men as far from home as could be imagined, carrying the burdens and the hopes of all mankind. At T-minus 15 seconds, the guidance on a rocket becomes internal, 300 feet tall, new metal alloys, 5 engines, 7.5 million pounds of rocket thrust. Go for TLI, flying up to deep space at 35,570 feet per second.
There have been 6 successful moon landings. When you land on the moon and you stop and you get out, nobody's out there. This little limb and the 2 of you, and you're it on this whole big place. And that's a weird feeling. It's a weird feeling to be 2 people and that's it. Alan Bean, Apollo 12.
A large population of manatees live in the waterways between Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral. Over 500 bird species have been accounted for, including many wintering migratory birds. Some might say they're luckier than us since they live in homes made of seasons and aren't so picky about food. I think that's like saying a wheel does not touch the ground or a turtle is longer than a snake. At the refuge, a manatee viewing deck and a 7-mile auto route for tourists. The Merritt Island Nature Refuge closes before and after blast-offs and during times of national emergency.
We spent a few happy months with those closely related Scott sparrows, even sneaking in a clutch of eggs or 2. But the chicks died for reasons too ridiculous to name, rats, window screens, and because we weren't officially allowed all that crossbreeding anyway. Nobody officially noticed the deaths. This is the case of the government becoming trapped in a semantic web of its own creation. The federal definition of a species is a nightmare of prose and conflicts with the species concept as used by biologists. The legal position that the dusky seaside sparrow is a pure race. Such reasoning applied to a human population would be called racism or miscegenation. Francis C. James.
Members of the School of Names were criticized for using words only to exhaust and distract. But from their point of view, using the right word implied the correct relation. If names are correct, order obtains. If names are misplaced, disorder. What causes names to be misplaced are dissolute explanations, shuo, also persuasions or arguments. If explanations are dissolute, then the inadmissible is deemed admissible, and the not so, so. The not right is deemed right, and the not wrong, wrong. The Annals of Lu Bewes.
Reader, no matter what, the dimensionless cannot be accumulated, yet its size is 1,000 miles. Hui Shi, help me out. I hate the others. I love the others. We are all beyond safety in numbers. Fish and wildlife took away the Scott sparrows, enraging the Disney World breeders. Persistence of officials of the Office of Endangered Species in supporting this purity of the races concept has much potential for doing irreparable damage to the Endangered Species Program as it might succeed through captive propagation. Fish and Wildlife simply replied that the Endangered Species Act does not cover hybrids.
So here is where my autobiography forks. On March 31st, 1986, I was the only male dusky alive, blind in an eye and old anyway for a sparrow, waiting to see what would happen or how it feels to be a piece of something big. My single body was a tiny spindle falling apart, yet holding this huge thing. It's hard to write this clearly as a character who might seem real. It's like when they tell you that arriving is always in the past. There is nothing more to this paper than the last words I knew for sure. June 17th, 1987.
After my death, the Disney employees didn't want to stop waiting in case another Dusky happened to fly in from the wild, the Space Center. They sat with my corpse a very long time. The coroner wasn't called until December of 1990, at which point I was officially declared extinct.
I discovered later that I was described as the loneliest man ever in the universe, which was really baloney. I rather enjoyed it. I was certainly aware of the fact that I was by myself, particularly when I was on the backside of the moon. I remember thinking, you look over there and there's 3 billion people plus 2 down there somewhere, and then over here there's 1 plus God only knows what. I felt it as awareness, almost a feeling of exaltation. It was a good feeling. I enjoyed that time. Mike Collins, the one who stayed in the command module, Apollo 11.
A bodhisattva will often leave a letter telling of a time when he or she will take rebirth by choice in order to be of benefit again to all beings. There are tests which help people identify these emanations, tulkas, as they are born in the world around us.
Discussion questions.
What must it be like to be the first man on the moon? Hint, Alan Bean, quote, I can't think of a negative thing about Neil Armstrong. I think it's wonderful that he's been the first man on the moon. Even though he's somewhat reclusive, that helps to preserve the image. That's a tough role.
Why is the dusky seaside sparrow not a sparrow?
Why was the dusky seaside sparrow not saved by the Endangered Species Act?
Solve for 6 if 6 equals 1 and 6 equals 0.
Are you sure species exist? What is your species concept?
Explain the sophist paradoxes. Eggs have feathers, or Merritt Island is on the moon. Bonus paradox. The shadow of a flying bird has never moved.
If we could hear the last words a bodhisattva utters as he passes to Dhammata, would we understand them?
When you see the Kennedy Space Center on the news, can you forget that sometimes death comes without warning, and sometimes with plenty of warning? Consider Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14. The biggest joy was on the way home. In my cockpit window every 2 minutes, the earth, the moon, the sun, and suddenly I realized that the molecules of my body and the molecules of the spacecraft and the molecules in the bodies of my partners were prototyped and manufactured in some ancient generation of stars. And that was an overwhelming sense of oneness, of connectedness.
Thinking everything is one, how can you still say anything? Hint, he adapts his this to the situation. That's all. Adapting and not knowing it is so is called Tao.